Hi there. Welcome back to Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all. I'm Kari Anderson with Incite Consulting. I've spent 25 years in the nonprofit sector in leadership roles with 7 organizations. Now I provide coaching and consulting services to ensure that nonprofits like yours have the structure and systems and processes to do your best work. Wherever I go, I continue to hear that the nonprofit executives need a space to gather, to receive tools, feedback, and advice, all to encourage you to stay the course in your particular business. It doesn't seem to matter if you're in a village of 182 or a metropolis of millions. Nonprofit work is still both gratifying and lonely. So I started this podcast to make sure that you've got a space to breathe, to laugh, to smirk, and to get excited again about the important work that you do. Today's podcast specifically focuses in goal setting as the start of a new year, how to set realistic goals to move the needle forward in your mission. Our session today has 3 takeaways. Number 1, reframing goal setting. Number 2, setting SMART goals. And number 3, aligning your calendar with your goals for this year. So it's a new year. For some of us, it's a new calendar year. For some of us, it's a new fiscal year. For those of you that don't play on the calendar fiscal year, you can work with me. There's still some pieces and parts that you can take away from this to take back to your job. I always think when we start a new calendar year or a new fiscal year that it's an appropriate time to reassess your priorities and setting realistic goals for the year. It's a chance to be able to talk either amongst yourself and a team of 1 or a team of 20 about the need to be flexible and not to view necessarily changes or setbacks as failures. I certainly have been privy to that. Goal setting sucks, frankly, when we think about it as only having one chance to get it right. For those of us that have perfectionistic tendencies, I'm one of them for sure. It's a mindset thing. And when we only think about goal setting as one way to do it or one chance to get it right, we are setting ourselves up to fail. And for certainly, I've done that a myriad of times in both my career as a nonprofit executive and my career thus far as a consultant. So I'd encourage you, first of all, as you're listening in the session today and thinking about whether this is relevant for you, can you be flexible? Can you be adaptable? And can you be honest about what needs to happen in your role, in your nonprofit, in this current calendar and fiscal year? Something else that I've been thinking a lot about, and certainly a life coach of mine shared this with me about 10 years ago. It has percolated up in my business often since 2014. The idea as you're setting goal setting about scarcity versus abundance in terms of your headspace, where you can actually reframe how you're thinking about where you're going to go, right? So when I'm thinking about scarcity versus abundance, it's getting into goal setting from a mindset of abundance and setting the tone for how you're going to succeed this year. Let me give you an example just in terms of my life right now. I'm mindful about certain financial goals that I've set for myself, not just professionally, but personally. And sometimes I will wake up at night and be more concerned about cash flow or be more concerned about bills. And I have recognized that that's more of a scarcity set instead of reminding myself that, hey, I've got clients or I have these pieces and parts in place that are going to ensure that I am successful and that my family is financially stable. That might or might not resonate with you, but when I can check myself in terms of thinking about all of the things that I'm doing well and the things that I can control in order to hit those goals, whether it's financial, whether it's client-based, whether it's fundraising. For you, it might be board support. If I'm thinking about it in terms of all the things I have that I can be grateful for, goal setting certainly is an easier task. And there's financial results and there's other results in terms of the goals and the processes that you set in place that certainly will manifest from there. And it's not a woo-woo piece, right? It's a correct headspace for you to be able to set your goals. Something else, sometimes that's easier for me rather than the whole scarcity versus abundance piece. It feels a little more practical, is the idea of setting goals based on start, stop, and continue. And let me give you an example of that. So every year I make a list of practices or habits for my business or my clients' businesses where There are practices or habits that they should start, practices or habits that they should stop, and practices or habits that they should continue. And when you think about the overwhelmingness that sometimes is around goal setting, this is a more practical way and maybe a more tangible way for some folks that are more linear in thought for you to be able to set this. So let me give you some examples. When I'm thinking about a habit to start or a practice to start, if I were in a development role, I would want to start logging all of my donor meetings into your database by the end of each week. That's a practice that you could start, right? A practice that you would stop. Perhaps if you were in a board chair or an executive director role, you could stop this practice of creating board meeting agendas that only have the chair and executive director's voice at the table. It's not a healthy practice for board meetings to just have one or two people speaking. And maybe a practice to continue, if you were in a leadership role, would be meeting with each staff member on a weekly basis. Goals also have a tendency to fail when we take on too much, not unlike New Year's resolutions. So my encouragement to you is that you start goal setting by evaluating where you're at now. And you could have a huge list of goals, or maybe your list is small or none. Explore all of the areas where you could actually work: operations, fundraising, programming, program development, etc. And think about where you want to be 12 months from now. If you're looking for ideas, here are some that I've heard swirling around the sector in terms of goals for leaders to set for this coming calendar and fiscal year. First one, growing your personal network. And what I'm thinking about in particular when I've dug down into, well, what does this mean in terms of a goal for a nonprofit leader? Well, we certainly have a need to be able to get out of our own space and introduce ourselves to other nonprofit professionals. There are also others in the sector that work with us that maybe are ancillarily tied to what we do. Maybe it's not just the bubble you work in. Maybe there are others that work within your sector or other like business, whether they're nonprofit or pro, that could be within your sector and you could learn from. The second would be to minimize your social media scrolling. I wax and wane with this myself, right? But the idea is that if we can make sure that we put down the phone and put down the scroll and actually focus on the most important work, as Dr. Seuss would say, oh, the places you'll go. Right? So stop the scrolling and get to the most important pieces of your work. It seems like it wouldn't be a big deal in terms of your business. And I can absolutely assure you the ROI at your business goes up when the phone goes down. And this is going to seem a little counterintuitive, but my next one that I have heard is, hey, if I reduce my social time online, then I actually need to engage more online. Well, what does that mean? Well, engaging more online might actually be having a specific purpose when you're online. A couple of examples would be actually responding to comments that are made on your social media posts, and perhaps engaging differently with LinkedIn contacts so that you can actually start a conversation and build rapport with them. So cutting down right on social media, but really more authentically engaging in your online experiences. A fourth one, tried and true for sure, but absolutely bears repeating, thanking your donors in new and meaningful ways. For some organizations, it's really rethinking what the role of the executive director or development director is. And yes, it's our responsibility to get those donor thank yous and acknowledgements out immediately. Best practice is 48 hours after your receipt of the gift, but thanking donors by engaging your board, right? Making sure that they've got the list of people that have given to you and making sure that they are the thank you brigade for your organization, because as studies have shown from Penelope Burke, that 95% of donors want to be thanked by board members, and 84% of those donors will actually make a gift again and an increased gift. So there's a reason to thank those donors in more engaged and meaningful ways. A fifth that I've heard running around, read more books. Read more books. And ideally you're reading like a book, right? Like not something online, but I'd still rather you'd read more books, and specifically books that are related to your field. Could you set a goal for reading a book a month? I love reading and I prefer reading the book, right? Versus online for a variety of reasons. I've always had a goal of reading at least a book a month. And last year I upped it to reading 3 a month. And that meant I needed to shift some time in terms of priorities for me, but it certainly is a way for me to learn, and it's a way for me to decompress in terms of workload and other responsibilities in life. A sixth that I've heard is the idea that you're actually being proactive about scheduling time with coworkers. And this certainly could be in person if you're still in an office, or it could be time online, whether you're working remotely. It is so important for us to continue to focus on building bonds and relationships with those we work with. And if you don't calendar it in, it's not going to happen with a frenetic pace that we end up having in today's workforce. Along the lines of meeting and building relationships, a seventh goal that I have heard again circulating around, which tells me tried and true is certainly a thing. And that's the idea of meeting your board members. And this isn't just about meeting your board members at a board meeting. It's meeting a board member where they're at. So that could be connecting with them via LinkedIn. Please don't connect personally via Facebook, right? Remember, they're your bosses. There needs to be a boundary there. So it's about meeting them online. It's about meeting them at their workplace. It's about meeting them and learning about them. It's not about you for these conversations. It's about learning about them and their work and their family and what makes them tick and what has connected them to your organization. And the eighth would be, this kind of alludes to a comment I just made, setting boundaries. And I've heard setting boundaries and try to stick with them. No, you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. So set a boundary. So some of those boundaries might look like, I'm going to take my PTO. I am going to make sure I'm out of the office, literally or figuratively, by 5 each day. I'm going to make sure that I take a break during lunch to take a walk or work out. Setting boundaries is extremely important for you in terms of balance for work and for life, and also making sure if you're a leader in your organization, regardless of title, that you are setting an example for the rest of your team. So those are some ideas, right? And certainly some trends that I have seen in the sector. And so I'll share now, right? What are my big goals for 2024? And for some of you, they may not seem that big, but for me, they're biggies, right? Because of some habits or practices that I've had in the past. I am not scheduling work calls on travel days. This bites me every time, right? I think, oh, I've got this layover at this airport, or I've got all this time on the road, and inevitably something happens, right? There's a storm, there's a flight delay, and I've scheduled client calls and I end up disappointing them or having to cancel them because I've not managed my time well. So that's, one of mine for 2024. The second is making sure that I'm building in more time that I think is necessary to complete client projects. I'm really good with regard to the initiation of the business cycle, the completion of the project, and the follow through. But sometimes life happens, right? Whether it's weather, whether it's an illness, whether it's technology, whether it is, something that goes bump in the night, and I need to build in more time to make sure that I actually deliver the product for the client. So that's a goal of mine for this year. I also have a goal to join a for-profit, not a nonprofit, a for-profit board of directors to continue to build a skill set and a muscle that maybe is a little weaker of mine. I have a goal to record 25 podcasts this year. This is a struggle for me. In case you may not know, I love speaking and interacting with the public. I do this often in education sessions and webinars and one-on-ones and conference work. But podcast recording is tricky for me. And even though I have a group of folks that are taking care of the things behind the scenes, for whatever reason, get in front of the camera and talking with you all like this is a struggle. So I needed to set a goal to be able to do it. And my fifth goal for this particular year is to make sure that I create a balance of work for me that's both short-term work with clients and long-term projects. So those are my 5, right? Could I have more? For sure, but I don't. Right? That's what I've chosen to focus on this year. So that's kind of, how we can consider goal setting. The second piece I wanted you to take away today is the idea that, like it or not, SMART goals are still a thing. So what does SMART stand for? S is for specific. M is for measurable. A is for attainable. R is for relevant. T is for time-based. Why is this such a big deal? Well, anytime you actually set a goal, we actually need to create a plan and some action steps to go along with it. And the idea behind SMART goals is that you're able to define who's accountable, a due date, and having a regular check-in to determine progress or the areas that need to be addressed or adjustments that need to happen. Something that I wish we could add to the end of the SMART goal, it's a C, it doesn't work out well in terms of the acronym. It's the idea of celebrating. We are so driven in this sector to make sure that we are achieving and doing and creating and executing that we forget to pause to actually celebrate the work that we've done. When a key milestone is reached, we need to acknowledge it. We're fast paced, we're ever changing. It doesn't always foster an environment of celebration. Make a goal this year to change that at your organization. The third thing that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today is the idea of aligning your calendar with your goals, right? So I'll just use my example. One was, hey, I can't schedule client calls on travel days. I needed to, first of all, go through any travel that I had already scheduled for 2024 and making sure that I didn't have client calls on top of that. And I've also put a stopgap on those dates that I am traveling to ensure that I am not booking calls on those dates. So we have to align, right, our time blocks with what we've said is most important to us this year. I'd encourage you every day to make sure you're setting a time for what's important. And I would even backstop that further to say, hey, schedule time at the beginning or end of each week or one day a month to ensure that your calendar is in sync with the goals that you've set for this year. It's so easy in our field to just put out fires every day. I think a lot of us have heard the adage urgent versus important. The only way that we can address that is ensuring that we actually have a calendar space to be able to handle this. Take healthy breaks. Go for a walk. Get a cup of coffee. Do whatever you need to do to be able to have balance in between those pieces. I'd also encourage you when you're thinking about calendar to take your flipping PTO, right? I don't know what you call it in your particular business, vacation or paid time off or comp time. Take it. It is critically important for you as a leader to not only take it so your bucket can fill back up, but also to model good behaviors for the rest of your team. And while we're on the subject, I really want to get all of you to a space where we have unlimited PTO. And if you'd like to get a hold of me to talk about that offline, I would be happy to. I've got tools and resources to actually have that be an implementable policy within your nonprofit. So as we wrap up today, reminder about things for you to think about. Reframing how you choose to goal set at your organization, setting SMART goals for your organization, and aligning your calendar with those goals. If you'd like more information, make sure to follow me on your favorite streaming platforms, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. And for additional resources and tools, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check out my website at inciteconsultinggroup.com. And remember, that's Incite with an INCITE consultinggroup.com. Thanks for joining me and have a great week. We'll see you next time.